Patriots of the South is back. We talk about the new hires for the Houston Texans and how they can come in and potentially fix this offense in year one.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm credential media member and Texans football analyst John Hickman, alongside the man with the big hat and the even bigger smile, repping H-Town, Brian Big Sarge Bearfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Today we'll be talking about Derek Stingley to close off today's show. He wants to stay home in H-Town. Let's talk about how impactful that is for a franchise that had to get over themselves for a couple of years, but to also have one of the better cornerbacks, if not number one, number two, number 1A, one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL want to stay here in Houston. Can Caley, can Cole Popovich, can Jerry Smolinski fix this offense? Can that trio get it done? And what does the recent hires says about the Houston Texans moving forward? Normally I say Big Sarge, and then he'll say greetings and salutations. But before I do that, you have a big hat. And since we're talking about the Patriots of the South, I might as well put my hat on today. And let's talk Texans, shall we?
I mean, Johnny, we're going back to the past and living in the past. Hell, I might as well put on a Dallas Cowboy hat since we're living on our past endeavors. I mean, because right now, I mean, the Patriots, you know what? The England Patriots, they are the Patriots of the South. They're at the bottom of the AFC East standings.
Well, listen, man, right after we finished recording and put out our latest episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, before this one, the Texans announced that Cole Popovich will be the Texans offensive line coach moving forward. And then the team added Jerry Smolinski to be their senior offensive assistant. Now you look at Nick Caley, Cole, and Jerry. They all have a coaching relationship, working together nearly a decade, starting with their New England Patriot days back in 2016. Sarge, Patriots of the South is back, but really just how you feel about this move for the Houston Texans.
First of all, greetings and salutations, Mr. Hickman. I'm glad to be back home in Houston. New York was nice, but I was ready to get back home. What these recent hires say about the Texans moving forward, John, I've been thinking about this for at least, I want to say, the last 2 days. And I feel like, John, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I want to say about a week or two ago on the Locked On Texans podcast, I said, hey, man, one of the things that I like about DeMeco Ryans being here and what he's done in the last 2 years is he's finally helped the Houston Texans organization shake the Patriot South moniker.
That was a couple of shows ago.
You're right, to shake that. And John, no sooner than I said that, it seems like we have slipped right back into it. It's like Nick, you know what? It's like Nick went dormant for 2 years and said, okay, I'm going to allow DeMeco and I'm going to take a step back because, okay, John.
Yeah.
Let me take you back down memory lane. When they fired Lovie Smith, right, after the last game that they won, that they wasn't supposed to win against the Indianapolis Colts, right, because they knocked them from having the number 1 draft pick to the number 2 draft pick, which ended up being C.J. Stroud, right? That was the Bryce Young C.J. Stroud. So after that Lovie Smith firing press conference, Nick Caserio came to the press conference, and that's the first time I've ever seen him shook. Like he's normally never shook. He's always full of confidence, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, always full of, like, he's had like 13 energy drinks, like always. But at this time, it was a somber mood. And one of the things that changed the whole trajectory of that press conference was Hannah McNair was sitting in the front row. Normally, Hannah is normally not at these type of press conferences. Now, the hiring, of course, she'll show up, but the firing, it was her and Cal McNair sitting at the front, and you could just see that Nick knew that he was on his last leg. And that, John, that I'm not telling you something that I haven't said, publicly before. Nick Caserio was on his way out the door too. One more bad season, if he would have got the coaching hire wrong, the coaching hire would have been wrong. Nick Caserio would have been fired, but he was able, along with the McNairs, to get D'Amico Ryans to come in here. In the next 2 years, you've seen what they've been able to do, and it's like he took a step back. Now, the crazy part about it to me is like now he feels empowered again. I guess I can't.
Sarge, I 100% agree
with
with you, man.
Huh?
I 100% agree with you. Yeah, this
And-
does feel like Nick Caserio took over, and it does feel like, for me, my thoughts moving forward, I'll get to that, but just right now it feels like, hey, worry about the defense. I'll worry about this side of the ball. You brought over your guy last time. It didn't work out. Let me get back to bringing in my guys to establish some of the things that I saw work for a decade plus in New England, bringing over, Nick Caley and now Cole Popovich being promoted. And we won Super Bowls doing some of these things successfully.
So
That's how
that's
I
what I
feel.
was, and that's what I remember, John. I said earlier this week: relationships and resumes, right?
Matters.
The relationship with the general manager Nick Caserio, being a former Patriot employee, and now he's bringing over. Bringing over two other guys that was with him when he was in New England. Already had Cole Popovich here, and don't get me wrong, we'll talk about this a little bit later on. I know Cole Popovich, I think, deserves this type of opportunity because of the way that the offensive linemen, the type of relationship they have with him. But John, these hirings, I'm just curious to see all the work that the Houston Texans organization has done, all the work that D'Amico Ryans has done. I don't want to see it to fall by the wayside because Nick has a personal agenda of making this team the New England Patriots of the South.
Yeah. Just to give some of my thoughts on it really quick, because I always try to be fair when decisions are made and moves happen. On the pod I did with Mike Debate when breaking down the hiring of Nick Caley, the one thing I wanted to emphasize was, hey guys, listen, he was a Patriot before he was a Ram. And everybody was caught up in the McVay system, right? And rightfully so. We've talked about it here on this show, but hey, listen, he has spent more time with the New England Patriots in his career than he has spent time in LA with the Rams and Sean McVay. And so you got to understand who rubbed off more on him, right? And where the connections were and the foundations were laid first, right? And now within 24 hours of a span, Houston retains a guy on their coaching staff from Caley's time in New England and brings in another guy during that same time from his time in New England. And ironically, I was against bringing back Cole Popovich to coach the O-line next year, but philosophically, most people pointed to the Rams' offense and completely overlooked the success the Patriots' offense had when he and Pop had time together in New England. And reportedly, Popovich didn't necessarily have too much of a say-so or authority in that locker room last year in terms of maybe making suggestions from a coaching standpoint. And so we'll see how that relationship moving forward can help curate success for this offensive line, right? But my pushback would have been disappointing because honestly, the only case I can make that Cole is still a guy Caley wants to bring in, to keep, is to establish the offense that they use to win a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. If that's the case, I'm eager to see what that looks like. What exactly happened in those offensive line room in those meetings? Sarge, it's a question of mine because we need to consider how much responsibility falls on D'Amico Ryans for letting the situation get so out of hand and out of control last year without implementing changes in 2024, especially if Houston brought back the assistant coach to now be the head position coach. And that brings me back to a conversation that I've been hinting at and talking about all year, the loyalty to mediocrity. How bad was it in that offensive line room where the next guy comes in and say, no, you're not the problem. You was not the problem. The guy that was let go was the problem. You could have fixed it. Why wasn't it fixed last year? And so I we'll talk about moving forward and what success looks like. We'll get to that, but
Yeah.
I can't help but to think, Sarge, why weren't some of these moves made last year? If Gerard Johnson was ever considered to be an offensive coordinator for this team, and if after Detroit, word up top came down and said, hey, we need to make a change offensively, why weren't these changes made? How much does it feel like to you is just, hey, I got the defense handled, the offense work itself out, and it never worked itself out?
Well, John, I will say this. I will talk about that and much more on the other side of the break.
Oh, well, we got more conversation. We got more Caley. We got more Cole. We got more Patriots of the South on the other side of the Locked On Texans podcast. We also got FanDuel, and they're making this Super Bowl exciting. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Who makes it exciting like that? The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to use, easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started right now. Bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59.
Welcome back to the Locked On Texans podcast. John, before the break, you and I were talking about the recent hires and what it says about the Houston Texans organization moving forward. And you brought up a very good question that I want to answer real quick before I get your thoughts on can Caley, Cole, and Jerry, because I cannot pronounce that last name.
Jerry Saplinski.
Yes, fix the offense. John, you said why did if it had gotten so bad in the rooms, as far as the offensive coordinator is concerned, as far as the offensive line is concerned, if it got so bad in those rooms, why didn't D'Amico come in and fix it during midseason? Well, I'm going to put it like this. I'm going to put it in military terms. Because for those of you all who are just, watching this show for the very first time, Big Sarge stands for, I was a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. And so in the Army, John, you have, I'm just going to use a company, for example. So you have a company commander, right? You have a company commander, and under that company commander, you have a command sergeant major. The company commander leads the company. He's over the company. His second in charge is his command sergeant major, and then after that you have a sergeant major. Then you go down and you have different types of you have different types of people that are running things. And so when you have the commander, right, the commander, his job is to run everything and delegate everything else. Hey, I'm going to run this and then I'm going to delegate everything else. And so if he has to micromanage his command sergeant major or his sergeant major or the first sergeant or sergeant first class, if he has to come down from running and doing his job here, if he has to come down and micromanage everything else, then there's no need for these people. So that's why you don't see a Bobby Sloak around here anymore. Hold on. That's why you don't see a Bobby Sloak around here anymore. And that's why you don't see a Chris Strausser around here anymore. But what you don't do is in the middle of a rotation, or if in the middle of a deployment, or if in the middle of whatever we have going on, if we have a mission, you don't change in the middle of the mission. You keep everything going and you make sure that you make sure that everything still runs until we're able to get to a point to where we make the changes. And so I say that in military terms, and I use that in military terms to say that D'Amico is one of those guys where he's not going to come in the middle of the season and disrupt what we have going on. Okay, I know that there's an issue. I know that there's a problem. Hey, look, but I hired these guys for a reason. Let me see if they can fix it. If they can't fix it, then we'll start taking the necessary steps, which they did. Like D'Amico never came out and was like, hey, Chris Strauss is not good. Bobby Slowick is not good.
But he won't do that. He won't do that.
He said different things, John. He said different things at the press conferences that if you were able to pick up on, you knew what he meant. Yeah. If you listen to Bobby Slowick, you knew, hey, D'Amico's not happy. So I'm saying that to say this, John, is that I know that things have started to get bad, but let's not make it a bigger distraction, especially when we're dealing with other things as far as the team is concerned, and fire these guys mid-season and now try to keep that thing going.
Well, you know what? One thing that sticks out to me is I forgot who mentioned it. Just the comparison and contrast between the D-line room, and the O-line room, and it just feels like, and hopefully this is where Nick Caley and Cole Popovich and Jerry Shablinski can come in and fix the offense, quote unquote. It feels like the maybe from CJ and Joe Mixon and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, those are like a hand and Tank Dell. That's a handful of guys, but it seems like the offense personality didn't resemble the team's personality as a whole. And so asking me, okay, how can this trio of John Carroll, New England Patriot guys come in and help fix this offense? I think in light of the moves that's been made, it's completely understandable and I think encouraging for a lot of Texan fans to sit back and say, Caley's offense is going to be diverse. Got two very successful systems he's coming from. Hopefully, presumably, that's what we'll see. Caley's offense is going to command a lot from the quarterback based on the hires that he's brought in, right? Jerry Shablinski, right? So I like the idea of when I look at fixing the offense, it's going to start from the top on down, and that's getting CJ Stroud to a place where he's in full command, full control. That's number one. Of course, number 1A, and you can make the case that it's going to be number one, fixing the offensive line. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I'm very eager to see how Houston uses this offseason, whether it's to draft or whether it's free agency to kind of help themselves on this offensive line. Do they revamp it? Do they try to get some money back from some of these guys with restructuring deals? I'm eager to see how that works out. But I will say I think one of the bigger things that we're going to look at, especially with the addition of Jerry Shablinski, who coached tight ends in his in his career, we're going to see them command a lot more from the tight end room because in both offenses, New England, I have a lot of experience watching those guys, New England and the Rams, the tight end means a lot in that offense because it's multi-phased, what you look for, multi-dimensional from that tight end group. I need you to block because I need you to be impactful as a run blocker. I need for you to be impactful as a chip blocker. I need for you to know the route concepts and know how to find zones and sit in zones and play aggressive. And I am super eager to see how those three come in and have an impact. We can say Dalton Schultz. I'm not sure how they feel about Dalton Schultz, but mainly a Brevin Jordan and Cade Stover going into his sophomore year. A lot of mock drafts are out there. A lot of mock drafts for the Houston Texans. I see them picking a tight end. And who knows, this trio may feel like, hey, we got bigger issues on our hands to fix than the tight end. And I may see something in one of those guys, and even a Dalton Schultz vet, that we can maximize and get the best out of. So when I look at fixing this offense, it starts up front on the offensive line, but it also includes the tight end unit, and it also includes getting the best version out of CJ Stroud, in my opinion, because Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady, I mean, where do we rank them all time? Where do we rank them in the last decade?
Yeah.
Top of the top. But CJ can be right there.
John, when was the last time the New England Patriots won a Super Bowl?
We beat the Rams.
What year was that?
2018, I believe.
So like 7 years ago?
7 years ago.
So why are we still talking about what the Patriots did 7 years ago, John? If we're going to talk about Caley and we're going to talk about Jerry, because Jerry comes from the Shablinski. He comes from the Rams as well, right?
He spent time with the Rams, yes.
So I don't understand why
Well,
why the Texans are trying to recreate the Patriot South when they haven't been and done nothing in 7 years, and we're still using if you still want to use an antiquated system from 7 years ago, then I'm saying you've already lost from the get-go. If anything, use Sean McVay, who has been more successful than lately than what the Patriots have. And John, let's just be honest. Like, everybody wants to talk about the Patriots and the way that they did it. The Patriots were two people, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Nobody from Bill Belichick tree has ever been successful.
Okay, so to counter that, I will say this. Caley was on that staff, and I think all three were on that staff, if I'm not mistaken, was on that staff when that defense for the New England Patriots stopped that record-breaking Rams offense when they beat them in the Super Bowl. I think the Rams offense scored 3 points, if I remember correctly. And so I look at that moment, right? I look at that moment, and I look at them understanding a couple of those guys spent time in both organizations. What did we do for the Patriots, and what happened for the Rams that got the Rams to be where they are right now? Adjustments, diversity, and switching things up. That's what we have to account for both franchises, for Nick Caley and for Jerry Stingley, because it matters in terms of how can I, when I get punched in the mouth, how can I adjust? And it took the Rams a couple of seasons to adjust, but when they did, they traded for Matthew Stafford, all-world quarterback. They figured it out how to win it.
But these are things Sean McVay did, not things that Nick Caley did or Jerry Stingley did. They're just on the staff. James Jones has just as many rings as LeBron James does. And you know why? Because every team let me take that back. Not as many rings, but I think he has like 4 or 5 rings, and those 4 or 5 rings and however many NBA Finals championships he went to is because he was on the team with LeBron James. And so, but we are not going to say, hey, man, James Jones, bro, if he needs opportunity, I'm pretty sure he can do this, that, and other. He was just there. So I understand what you're saying, John, but to give some pushback, these people were just there. They weren't integral parts of making this thing work. They was just
but that goes back to our conversation of why we are so concerned and a little bit weary, because we both agree, hey, listen, they need an experienced play caller. So everything we're talking about is really just the idea of what we think we're going to get. And if I look at his background and resume, the idea and thought process is between the two franchises, you should be able to bring more to this offense in due time than a Bobby Slowick, because versatility, adjustments, diversity, that matters. And I also like the idea of a guy that was around a poor wide receiver room and got the most out of him. Granted, Tom Brady's Tom Brady, the greatest to ever do it. But does he have an idea to implement here in Houston to maybe maximize some of the bottom tier guys and raise that floor of the wide receiver room? It's all an idea. I agree with you. That's why we were concerned about a first-year head caller. But it's literally all an idea of what we think we're going to get with no real proof to back it up, because he's not an experienced play caller.
And with that being said, John, all I'm saying is that I don't know, like, yes, pull from some of your experience from the Patriots, but this much of it. Use more of what you learned from Sean McVay, who actually got a lot out of having less. You remember now, they went to the Super Bowl. That Super Bowl you're talking about, they had Jared Goff. And then they got Matthew Stafford.
Then they got Matthew Stafford.
So Sean McVay has always been able to get the best out of less. And so all I'm saying is that when you're looking at these guys that are coming from the Rams, I got that they have the Patriots on their resume and they were there during the heydays. That's cool.
And spend time together, that matters too, because of Nick Caserio on down.
If you could pull something from that, then cool. But if I'm looking at it as a Texans fan, if I'm looking at it as a Texans organization, hey man, I need what you were doing with the Rams. I need what you were doing with the Rams, not what you were doing with the Patriots. Because if it was that way, then why did everything fall off once Tom Brady left? And so that's all I'm saying is pull more from the Rams than you do from the Patriots.
Listen, I love the conversation, and I think it's a great conversation to be had. What I will say is spending time with Matthew Stafford immediately after spending time with Tom Brady and coming into a situation with a CJ Stroud, that should only bode well for the young quarterback here in Houston. Now, on the opposite side, Houston has a young cornerback. They want to make sure they keep here in H-Town, and he also wants to stay in H-Town as well. So we'll talk about Derek Stingley to close out the show. Before we do that, I want to let you guys know that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want to do, and what do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January, every February, every new year brings a new chapter, a new 365 with blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of your life you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author in our own story, in your own story as well. Thinking about starting therapy? Well, check it out, man. Sarge and I are both huge advocates of starting and going through therapy. Getting yourself right mentally, that can lead to getting yourself right physically, that can lead to getting yourself right spiritually. We love therapy here, and BetterHelp can help you out. Whether it's learning how to set boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Don't let nobody else write your story. You write your own story, and you can do so with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked on today to get started, to get your first 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we talk about Derek Stingley wanting to stay home, the new Astros park, it's not Minute Maid no more. It's Daikin. It don't hit the same, man. I wore this because I just wanted to rep when home felt like home. So
I get it, John. Hey, RIP to Minute Maid. I like
RIP
going
to
to the
Minute
juice
Maid.
box. They took the train away, John. Yeah.
Minute Maid, by the way, has some of the best, if not the best beer in the city of Houston. And I'm talking about cold. It's a fun place to go get your drink on. Let me say that.
Shout out to the guys over at the Locked On Astros podcast. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe over there as well. Those guys do an outstanding job as well.
Absolutely. And now, speaking about staying home and wanting to keep home, Derek Stingley was recently on the Pivot podcast. CB1, CB2, CB1A, however you want to rank it, top 3 cornerback in the NFL, due for a payday soon. Reportedly, he's going to break the bank, but he talked about wanting to stay in the city of Houston for the Houston Texans, and also using Nico Collins as an example of, hey, Nico was up for a contract. I did not see him at workout. I ain't see him missing out. I ain't see him skipping out. He was at work every day, putting in their work, so it's still work to be done. That speaks to the what word, the C word, culture of this franchise and organization, but it also speaks to just how different times are. But I'm glad Stingley wants to stay home here in Houston, Sarge.
Yeah, John, he's one of those guys who eats, lives, sleeps, football. I told this story before. I'll tell it again. When they were practicing in Ohio after the Hall of Fame game, and they were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers on that Friday, instead of coming back to Houston, they decided to stay in Ohio and practice at Nick Casario's old high school. And they went through practice. I mean, it was hot too. And they went through practice. And after practice was over, Derek Stingley still had his helmet on. He still had his helmet on. And so when I got an opportunity to speak with him one-on-one, I said, Derek, I watched you on yesterday have on your helmet after you all had went through a two hour, seemed like a 2 hour, 3 hour practice. And it was hot. And you did, you were on the field as much as you could be. And you still had your helmet on. I was like, you look like you was ready to practice again. He said, Sarge, I keep this helmet on because I be thinking about the plays that I missed. Not the plays that I made, the plays that I missed and what I could have done better. Even, during that Pivot podcast, he said about the amount of interceptions that he had. I think he had 7 for the season. He said, I could have had 20. I think, John, against the Dallas Cowboys, he had two interceptions, correct?
Yeah, and I also think he had 2 against Miami.
He had 2 interceptions against the Dallas Cowboys. And when he came into the locker room, I said, Derek, you should have had 4. He said, I should have had 5. And so that's just the kind of player that he is, John. He's constantly thinking about how he can get better. And he doesn't ever want the personal accolades and the personal accomplishment. He likes for his play to speak for him. And so he doesn't mind talking about himself. He'll definitely answer questions about himself, but his whole thing is always, you see his face light up when he starts talking about Kamari Lassiter, or when he talk about a former Houston Texans cornerback, Steven Nelson, and how he was able to help him out. How he talks about a Nico Collins, how he talks about a Will Anderson Jr., he talks about a CJ Stroud, a Joe Mixon, Azeez Al-Shaair. These are guys that are his teammates that knows what he brings to the table, but he also likes what they bring to the table. He was one of the people, John, that was so excited about getting middle linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, because he said, hey, that guy works hard, and he is the quarterback of our defense. He makes everything goes. He puts us in the right position. And so when you have a player like a Derek Stingley Jr. who's committed to playing football and getting better, he doesn't allow any of that outside noise to bother him. He just knows what he can do. And John, you know, when his first year or two, he went through a lot of injuries. I think the one of the major injuries he sustained was during practice, and he missed a couple of games. And then, you know, you started to hear the chatter throughout the social media and on the airwaves saying, did the Houston Texans waste a pick? We know what he did when he was in college at LSU, but is he still that guy? Can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the field? Something like they were saying about a Nico Collins, who's just put together the last two seasons that he's played been very productive. When you look at what Derek Stingley has done. And the last thing I want to say, John, because he does deserve a bag, he does deserve every penny that he's going to get from the Houston Texans organization. One thing that really fueled Derek Stingley Jr. was the talk about how good Sauce Gardner was, how good Sauce Gardner is. Derek is competitive like that. And he's like, hey, look, even though I'm not going to talk about myself, no, y'all not going to just say that this guy is better than me when I know what I'm able to do. I know who I am. I know how hard I work. And that fueled him to be able to get to that all-pro status. John, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that if he doesn't miss the amount of games that he missed last season, he would have made all-pro as well.
Yeah, nobody was playing cornerback, playing that position better than him on the second half of last season. And nobody. And it just led over, to this season. I will say this. It's very important to look at it from this perspective. Derek Stingley will be a part of the core for this team moving forward. He's always going to give your defense an opportunity to have a championship defense. We compared him to some of the greats. I said Champ Bailey, but just understanding that 4 years ago, this wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And so just kudos to the front office for putting the staff and putting the roster together so the Houston Texans can get some highlights around the league, get a couple of national games. They're winning ball games now, but Nick Caserio knew the coaching staff and scouting staff at the time knew the type of player Derek Stingley was and how much he'd fit what they're building here in Houston. I can't wait to see the deal that they get done with him. And I wholeheartedly believe he's going to get 25 M's a year. And so
John,
hopefully Sarge, I mean, if he sees this, hook us up. Thank you for watching.
Well, hold on, one quick thing. That's why the Houston Texans are in win now mode, because coming after Derek,
it's a few guys. It's that man. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Hey guys, it's the last time y'all gonna see it.
Make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with the Z at the end.
By the way.
That was weird.
I'm picking that head up. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.